I'm Sharon Wiginton with Eatin Lovin Life, and we're here today in Dr. Robbins' clinic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he's graciously agreed to do a teaching for us on health and nutrition. Thank you, Dr. Robbins. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Dr. Robbins has made a career-long study in nutrition as it relates to health. Okay, I'd like for you to really emphasize the protein argument, because that's the biggest argument I get is, even when I tell people there's protein in fruits and vegetables, they want to know, well, which ones and how can that be? I've never heard that, they tell me.
What our body wants when it wants protein, it's actually wanting amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein. See, if I ate a cow muscle, my body does not use that cow muscle at all. What it does, it breaks it down into the amino acids, which are the building blocks of that cow protein, and then takes those amino acids and realigns them to make a muscle for me. Or if I need a new heart cell, to eat a pig heart won't help me at all, because I can't use it. In fact, we know even if we put a human heart in another human, the body tries to reject it because it's not the body's own signature version. So what we're really after when it comes to building structure, new cells, is not protein, it's amino acids. Animal protein is a high concentration of amino acids, that's true, but all fruits and vegetables contain amino acids. And it's a lot easier to get to them. We don't have to spend as much energy to get to those. The traditional food science likes to tell us we need about 75 plus grams of protein a day. The actual medical studies show that we only need about 25 to 30 grams a day. And that's very easy to acquire eating fruits and vegetables. A handful of raw nuts every day has got a good source of amino acids. So it's all about amino acids, not about protein as such.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what about when you talk about the percentage of protein in animal products and how high it is?
Well, our first 9 months of life, we will do the most growing we'll ever do. Therefore, our need for protein is greatest then. And we will double in body weight during those first 9 months of life. And we do it on mother's milk, assuming the child is nursing. Mother's milk contains only 2.5% protein. That's the most growing we'll ever do, the most demand for protein on 2.5% protein. Animal protein can be up to 20–25%. So the question is, what are we doing with all that extra protein? And the answer is that we're spending a lot of energy and nutrition processing it out of the body, or if we can't process it out, then it gets stored in our tissues as toxins, and this is where the chronic degenerative diseases come from. Fruits and vegetables average 5%, 6% protein. We say, well, that's more than mother's milk, but the difference is it's a vegetarian protein, which is a lot easier for us to process, and we get a positive return versus a negative return. I might mention a book called The McDougall Plan by John McDougall, a medical doctor, who does a great job of putting together the scientific medical literature of how little protein we actually need and the consequences of too much. Mm-hmm.
And in the protein powders, we see people
even in the protein powders,
it's too much.
It's too much. We can even get too much vegetarian protein. A lot of these bodybuilders are really sick guys because they load up on that soy protein powder, and it can be 60% protein, and do that every day. That's just,
it's really more than the body needs.
And even though they're working out, they cannot use that much. And I often tell these bodybuilders when I try to get them to cut back on the protein because it's destroying their health down the road, I said, the mammal that is the strongest per body ounce and has the same digestive physiology as us is the gorilla. And the gorillas live on fruit. That's all they live.
And speaking of that, the digestive physiology, compare us to a carnivorous animal, the human body to the carnivorous.
Our digestive system is designed for what God originally designed for us. I'm talking about fruit and then the vegetables. Our saliva, for example, is alkaline. And the reason for that is our digestion actually begins in the mouth, and the enzyme that the body produces in saliva is called ptyalin, which is to digest starch, carbohydrates. Well, our ideal food was fruit, and so it makes sense that the digestion, as it begins in the mouth, would be starch-splitting enzymes, but those starch-splitting enzymes only work in an alkaline environment, so the saliva is alkaline to start let that process begin. Then our stomach can digest both starches and proteins, but it has a limit to how much acid it can produce to help break down the protein. And then when you get to the small intestine, there again we can digest, that's where we finish up digestion, we can digest protein there, and starches, we can do both. But there's a limit to the amount of the protein splitting enzymes that we can produce per meal. We look at a carnivorous animal, their saliva is acid. Well, that's because animal protein, which is their primary diet, breaks down in an acid environment. Their stomach produces copious amounts of protein splitting enzymes, and then the same with the small intestine. There's a couple other things about our digestive physiology, is that we have no sharp teeth compared to a carnivorous animal, and that's because we're not ripping and tearing meat. So, well, that's what a knife and forks for, but just think in the ideal or the primitive situation back in the Garden of Eden, where's our knife and fork, right? So we don't have the teeth to actually chew the meat thoroughly, even if we do cut it up. Whereas the carnivorous animal, every one of their teeth are sharp. That's so they can thoroughly chew that up to break it down to smaller particles for easier digestion. And then our digestive tract is about 3 times as long, 4 times as long as a carnivorous animal. Now I find that interesting because animal protein, after it's digested, the waste that remains in the intestine, if it's not eliminated pretty quickly, it breaks down through something called putrefaction, which is rotting, and that produces some pretty toxic byproducts. So here's an animal that's totally designed to break down animal protein, digest it thoroughly, and still has a very short digestive system to get the waste of that protein out quickly so it doesn't rot in the system. Well, here we are. Our teeth are not designed to chew it up thoroughly, or our digestive juices are not designed to break the protein down very thoroughly, and then we have this extra long, by design, digestive system. So how long is that protein byproduct staying in there? Well, 4 times as long as a carnivorous animal, and so it's going to tend to rot and putrefy, and something called toxic bowel syndrome is very prevalent in this country. It's the consequence of putrefaction and the poisons from that absorbing into the body and poisoning our system.
Okay. What about kind of getting off of the meat subject? You talked about people who are vegetarian in other countries are much healthier than we are. I've heard you say also that you have some pretty sick patients who are vegetarians.
Yeah, I treat a lot of sick vegetarians, and the reason is that they tend to eat only cooked foods. We eat live foods, primarily, not totally, but primarily. They also tend to get locked into just a very limited variety of foods that they eat. So they eat a lot of grains, a lot of cooked vegetables, and that's about it. So hardly any fruit, and that's not a healthy diet either. It's not because of the lack of meat, it's because of the lack of live food, the lack of variety of food.
So vegetarians don't necessarily maybe have the knowledge that they need the live.
That's it. They don't have the knowledge. And, you know, under vegetarian label, you can eat cake and candy and drink Coke and coffee. I mean, those are, so they can still put a lot of negatives in there, yeah.